Hello, everyone. Welcome to the video covering Chapter 2 of our Social Work 222 text. Just like in the first video, this video is not meant to substitute the work or the reading that you need to do. This is just to help us focus on some of the key terms and draw attention to those as you go into your reading and understanding. So the main things we're going to cover in this video, we're going to talk about the 5 social institutions. We're going to focus in on social welfare specifically, and then we're also going to briefly talk about social work as a profession. So let's start by talking about those 5 social institutions. And the reason that we're talking about the social institutions, I'll discuss here in a little bit. One being that it is important for us to understand that these 5 social institutions are all pieces that impact how an individual kind of navigates and exists in life, but they are also the systems that social workers have an impact within. Okay, so those 5 social institutions that we're talking about the economy, the polity, we're talking about family, religion, and the social welfare system. So I'm going to briefly talk about family and religion first. I think these are the concepts that are maybe the most innately understood. So I'm not going to focus a lot of time on those. Suffice it to say, maybe what their primary functions are. So regarding family, the primary function of family is to assist with social integration, so to kind of prepare individuals to exist in other systems, and then religion is to assist with socialization itself, and then to help individuals connect to a higher power and to their deities. Okay, now some of the other concepts are going to be more muddled, and you're going to see those popping up over and over again within the class. So one of them is the economy. So the economy is kind of generally what you expect, in that it's capital, it's wealth, it's the production of services, it's the flow of money, basically. The other piece is the polity. Okay, now the polity is the existence of power and control within a society, as you might understand through the name itself. This would include our political systems. This would include government. Now, one of the things that's really interesting that the book draws your attention to is the fact that these 2 concepts can be really closely tied together. This is an excerpt from the book that I think does a good job highlighting that. They say, in the United States, the polity and the economy are so closely tied that it's difficult to see them as separate. For laws and regulations are based on the ideas of capitalism, and the free market in much of the economy is politically supported. Higher socioeconomic classes often determine what legislation will be passed through lobbying, who will be elected to office through financial contributions, and what contracts, such as for defense, will be developed and awarded. The close link between the polity and the economy is often captured in the term political economy. Okay, so so just know that you're going to see this this existence of power, this theme of power persist through this book. Okay, those who are in power set the rules, the regulations, and unfortunately, you're going to see that they are not always going to be functioning in an altruistic way, right? Oftentimes people still kind of look out for what is in their own best interest. And so when you're in a position of power, you tend to do things to keep yourself in power and to keep others out of power. And so that is that combination of the economy and the polity, you're going to see work against the individuals that we serve. Okay. Now, the other piece is the social welfare system. So this class is the emergence of social welfare services, right? So we want to know what social welfare is. Now, social welfare kind of encompasses all of those other institutions within it. But let me dive into the book and read a definition so that we're all kind of on the same page regarding what social welfare is. So the book states, to most Americans, social welfare means giving money to the poor, to people who cannot or will not work to support themselves and their families. So before I go any further, I want to use this as an idea to harken back to the first video when we briefly mentioned this idea of the unworthy poor. Okay, so a lot of people, they still have that notion because of this this kind of underlying Protestant work ethic, whether you know it exists or not, that helps us to identify this person is worthy of assistance and this person is not worthy of assistance. Okay, now I'm not saying that's a good thing. Understanding something doesn't give an excuse for it. I'm just stating that this is where a lot of individuals like preconceived notions exist regarding like who should receive assistance. And so that idea persists when we're talking about social welfare. However, the benefit, more properly called public assistance, is not the whole of social welfare. So when they talk about public assistance, they're talking about the actual financial benefit, financial benefits that are given as direct care to individuals. And they go on to say, it is not the whole of social welfare, which encompasses almost every kind of service provided to members of society. Instead, here is another definition of social welfare. It is rather an organized system of laws, programs, benefits, and services which strengthen or assure provisions for meeting social needs, basic for the welfare of the population and the social order to aid individuals and groups to attain satisfying standards of life and health and personal and social relationships, which permit them to develop their full capacities and promote their well-being in harmony with the needs of their families and the community. Now, specifically, I want to go a step further and look at the definition that pops up on page 35 in your text. When we say, for the purposes of this book, but also for this class, the American social welfare system is the social institution that provides society's sum total of all goods and services to enhance the social and economic well-being of society's members, or to ensure their conformity to current societal norms, standards, and ideologies. And then it goes on one step further and talks about that within social welfare, there are two components to that there is this idea of social treatment and social control. And you're going to see these two ideas linked continuously through this class as well. So the social treatment piece is the provision of goods and services for the enhancement of human life. Okay, so this might be what you maybe more readily identify as public assistance or benefits that directly go to aid individuals so that they have a higher quality of life. But then we also have the social control, which is the provision of services to ensure conformity from deviance. So when we're talking about social control, we're talking about things in a formalized manner. So we're talking about things like the criminal justice system, but then you're also going to see social control pop up in other ways as well. So a minute ago, we talked about those who are in power tend to stay in power and to lobby and pass legislation to keep themselves in power and to keep others it kind of stuck in the system, right? To create such a gap that it becomes difficult to overcome some of these barriers that have been put in place. And so through the existence of some social welfare programs and the way that they exist, it also exhibits a form of social control. So just kind of know that you're going to see these ideas linked back and forth throughout this class. Okay, so those are kind of the main 5 social institutions that your book discusses. Also kind of a brief overview and definition of social welfare. So the last thing I want to talk about is the social work as a profession real briefly, okay? We're going to continue talking about social work. You're going to see that pop up a lot within this class. And if you've had 221, you've had an introduction to what social work is about, but we're gonna discuss social work throughout this class as well. So one of the things that I think is important in terms of talking about social work and this chapter when we're talking about social institutions is the fact that earlier I mentioned that social work impacts all of those different pieces, right? Those are all systems that we can exist within. The other piece is that social work as a profession, we believe in what we call client and situation, or we also will hear that as person and environment. And so that is, as a profession, we understand that a human's condition is not the result of a single piece, right? Like you are not who you are because of one single aspect of who you are, right? You exist in multiple systems, right? All of those different social institutions have an impact on who you are and what how you're kind of existing through life, right? So the way that you were raised by your family, what your religious beliefs are, where you're kind of nestled in the economy, what kind of political power you have, what kind of political power is exerted upon you, right? So all of those things are playing in social work. Once you kind of get into working with individuals, you'll hear the term biopsychosocial spiritual assessments, and that's because when you're assessing someone for services and to assist them, you have to consider all those pieces. What is biologically kind of innately affecting their outcome? Psychologically, right? What's going on inside the mind? Sociologically, what systems are impacting the individual? And then spiritually, how is that individual being impacted? Right? Is there a spiritual deficit? Is there a spiritual strength there? So all those things need to be considered, and so that's why you see that pop up in the book alongside social institutions. One thing I also want to discuss briefly that the book points out is that in the past, they note that social work as a whole has fallen more towards one end of the spectrum, near a profession. But there are a lot of individuals who also claim social work as a whole is, or more generally, right? And so one thing that I want to reiterate, this is something that was passed on to me by social work faculty when I was an undergrad, is that if you pursue your BSW and you graduate with your bachelor's in social work, you are a social worker. That is a profession, okay? And I think that as social workers, sometimes we are willing to kind of step aside because it tends to be our nature a little bit to just give way and let others kind of walk over us because we don't want to hurt feelings. But it is important that if you enter the profession of social work, that you defend the profession of social work. You know, we have our own specific value system. We have the NASW code of ethics that guides the work that we do. We have accredited bodies that make sure that when someone goes through a social work program, such as the one here at USI, that they meet certain standards, right? And then I'm not going to dive into it now, but there's also licensure tracks once you get that BSW and once you go into your MSW. So although historically you're going to see social work defined more broadly, just know that social work is a profession, and that it is a profession because of those unifying ideas that we have in terms of the way that we practice and the things that we believe. Okay, and then also within the text near the very end, it also talks about some of the other it talks about some of the specific areas where social workers function. So on page 54 of the text, you see highlighted just a couple of those pieces. So the first one that's listed on there is clinical practice. So you don't do clinical work at the bachelor's level. You really dive into that at the master's level. But this is actually kind of getting in and working with the mental health of folks and getting in and doing one-on-one therapy. There's group work, so working with families, but also working with kind of groups as a whole. You see a lot of group work in the addictions field. Community practice, working in administration, policy practice, research and teaching. And so these are all really broad areas, but you're also going to see, again, that overlap in terms of the areas where social workers function and that overlap with those ideas of the social institutions, right? So when we're talking about the economy and the polity, and you see that that social workers have the ability to work in administration and policy practice and research and teaching, then we are indirectly making impacts on those social institutions, right? And then at the individual level, when we're doing one-on-one kind of case management services, we're working more on the micro level, working with individuals to overcome those personal barriers. But there's more in play than just what an individual brings to the table. We have to always consider the macro picture as well, right? So if we stay too focused on the individual, we're going to miss what larger piece is impacting them and maybe making it more possible for them to kind of get stuck, right? So so I'm going to end this video here. I hope this was helpful. Like I said, this is not all encompassing for the text. Please make sure to go back and fully read the material. But I hope that this helps guide either your reading if you're watching this first, or if you went through and read already, that this helps to clarify and help connect the dots of your material. If you have any questions, as always, please seek me out. Thank you guys for watching.